Adrian, please. She won't survive without you." The voice on the phone shattered the night. 5 years of secrets, a newborn he never knew existed, and enemies closing in from every side. One man, one child, one chance to survive. Will he make it in time? Welcome back to Heart-Woven Tales. I'm Selena, and I hope you're doing well. I'd love to know, where are you listening to me from today? Make sure you stay with me till the very end of the story, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss a tale. Now, let's dive in. Adrian Voss sat behind the polished mahogany table, the dim light of the office casting long shadows across the room. Outside, the city slept, unaware of the silent war simmering in the heart of its underworld. He had spent the last 12 months navigating betrayals, double crosses, and ruthless calculations, each step bringing him closer to ending the year-long gang war that had drained his empire. Tonight, he was supposed to finalize the last piece of the puzzle, a deal that would cement peace, or at least a fragile truce. The room smelled faintly of cigar smoke and leather. His men surrounded him, their faces tense, muscles coiled, weapons resting within reach. Adrian studied the contracts laid out before him, eyes narrowing, mind calculating, every decision a potential turning point. He had mastered the art of control, of dominating a world built on fear and loyalty. Every instinct in him screamed caution, every sense honed to detect danger before it arrived. Then the silence shattered. His phone buzzed on the table, a small vibration that seemed almost insignificant against the weight of his empire. Yet when Adrian glanced at the screen, time froze. The number was unfamiliar, untraceable, a line he had given to no living soul. His pulse quickened, the air suddenly heavy. He lifted the phone slowly, his thumb hovering over the answer button, sensing that this call would change everything. Adrian Voss? The voice was sharp, urgent, trembling with desperation. There was no preamble, no hesitation, just the weight of life clinging to every syllable. "You have to come. Now. She won't make it without you." Adrian's heart faltered. He had not felt such a jolt in years. He leaned back, gripping the edge of the table so tightly that his knuckles whitened. "Who is this?" he demanded, voice low, controlled, though every muscle in his body was screaming. The reply came quick, almost frantic. "It's the hospital. Serena Hale, she's in labor. Critical. She needs you, Mr. Voss. Please, if you don't come, she won't survive the night." The name cut through him like a blade. Serena Hale. 5 years ago, she had been his world and his weakness, a spark of fire in the darkness of his life. Their love had been forbidden, dangerous, burning with intensity that neither could resist. And yet, that night of passion, of stolen promises and whispered confessions, had ended in fear and betrayal, leaving scars on both their hearts. Adrian's mind raced, memories crashing against each other like waves. He remembered the feel of her hand in his, the warmth of her laughter, the way her eyes had burned with both love and defiance. He remembered the terror that had driven them apart, the threats that had forced him to leave her in silence, and the secret they had shared, a secret neither had dared to confront. 3 months ago, he had glimpsed her at a charity event, across a room filled with strangers. It had been a fleeting moment, a shadow of the past, yet it had awakened something inside him he thought long dead. His chest had tightened. Old emotions he had buried under blood, power and ambition rising like a tide he could no longer control. And now that tide had returned, crashing with urgency and dread. Adrian's hand tightened around the phone. "Where is she?" he demanded, voice clipped, sharp, betraying none of the fear clawing at his chest. The nurse hesitated, a pause that felt like an eternity. "Private wing. She's stable for now, but her vitals are dropping. Please, Mr. Voss. She won't make it through the night alone." Alone. The word echoed in his mind. 5 years of absence. 5 years of mistakes, 5 years of a life he had thought he had left behind. But clearly the past had never truly left him. The empire, the deals, the power, all of it seemed meaningless in that moment. There was only Serena and the fragile life she carried. Adrian pushed back from the table, the chair scraping sharply against the marble floor. His men looked up, questioning, alert. "Leave the contracts," he said, voice hard, unwavering. "Everything else can wait." A murmur of disbelief ran through the room, but Adrian did not care. The gang war could wait. The world could wait. For once, nothing else mattered. His focus narrowed to a single point: the woman he had loved, the child he had never known, and the seconds ticking mercilessly toward disaster. He grabbed his coat, the weight of it feeling heavier than any weapon he had carried. The corridors of his office, the city streets outside, the sprawling metropolis all seemed to blur as he moved with a purpose he had not felt in years. Every car, every shadow, every flicker of light could hide danger, but tonight Adrian Voss would not be stopped. As he drove through the sleeping city, the neon lights reflecting off the rain-slicked streets, memories surged unbidden. He recalled the night they had parted, how fear and circumstance had torn them apart, how her tears had haunted him in his dreams for years. He remembered the way her voice had sounded when she had whispered his name, a fragile sound that had burned itself into his memory. The phone buzzed again, startling him. The nurse's voice, more desperate this time, cut through the hum of the engine. "Mr. Voss, the doctors are preparing for emergency intervention. She's fading fast. You need to hurry. She won't make it if you don't get here now." Adrian's jaw tightened. He pressed the accelerator, the engine roaring like a beast released, the city flying past in streaks of neon and shadow. Each second felt like an eternity. Each red light, each pedestrian, each turn was a potential nightmare, but nothing could stop him. Not bullets, not rivals, not the consequences of the life he had built. He thought of the child, the tiny life yet to see the world, and a surge of protectiveness unlike anything he had ever known coursed through him. He thought of Serena, alone in the hospital, trembling, struggling, fighting for survival. He thought of the years lost, the words unspoken, the love abandoned, not out of hate, but out of necessity, out of fear. The hospital came into view, a stark monolith in the night, lights glaring, the sound of distant sirens wailing. He could see movement inside, the hurried steps of nurses, the blinding of surgical lights through frosted glass. Time seemed to slow, every heartbeat a drum of warning, every breath a measure of urgency. Adrian parked with precision, his movements sharp, deliberate, controlled. The world outside could collapse, enemies could strike, deals could crumble. But inside, he had only one mission. He entered the lobby, his presence commanding, yet every step carried the weight of dread and anticipation. The receptionist looked up, startled. "Mr. Voss?" "Yes," he said, voice tight. "Where is she?" The nurse appeared, small and frantic, leading him through the maze of corridors. Adrian's eyes scanned every shadow, every corner, every door. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and fear, the air thick with tension. He could hear monitors beeping, hearts racing, the faint cries of life and struggle intermingled. Finally, they reached the private wing. The nurse hesitated, glancing at him with a mix of hope and fear. "She's in there," she whispered, nodding toward a door at the end of the hall. "Please, she's counting on you." Adrian's hand froze on the handle. Behind the door lay the woman he had loved, the child that was part of him, and the culmination of every regret, every memory, every longing he had carried for 5 long years. The moment stretched, suspended between hope and despair. One push, one moment, and everything could change. He inhaled sharply, bracing himself for what awaited inside. The nurse's hand squeezed his shoulder, grounding him, then stepped back. Adrian opened the door, and in that instant time fractured, the night shattered, and the man who had ruled the underworld with an iron fist found himself standing on the edge of a storm he had never expected, a storm that carried love, fear, and life itself. The door swung open and Adrian Voss stepped into the delivery room, the harsh white light stabbing at his eyes like a dozen accusing fingers. The smell of antiseptic mixed with the faint metallic scent of blood hung thick in the air, making him tense. Serena lay on the hospital bed, pale and trembling, her grip on the sheets tight as if they were the only anchors holding her to the world. Her hair clung to her damp forehead, strands plastered by sweat, and her face was etched with pain that no luxury or power could erase. She looked smaller than he remembered, more fragile, yet beneath the surface there was a fire he had never been able to extinguish. Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat the chaos around them disappeared. Time compressed, the years of separation, the betrayals, the regrets, and the unspoken words all held in that single, searing stare. Adrian's chest constricted, a sensation foreign to a man who had stared down assassins, negotiated wars, and faced death countless times. This was different. It was raw, unfiltered, human. He saw the terror, the pain, the vulnerability, and beneath it the familiar strength that had always drawn him to her. For a fleeting moment he wanted to reach out to erase the past, to hold her and make all the wrongs right. The doctor, a man with sharp eyes and precise movements, approached quickly, voice clipped, urgency underlying every word. "Mr. Voss, she requires an emergency procedure immediately. Her vitals are unstable, and the baby is in distress." He glanced at Adrian, a subtle appeal for authority. "We can sedate her, but only with your consent." Adrian's eyes darted to Serena, searching, calculating. She looked back at him, her gaze steady despite the fear, her fingers tightening around his hand the moment he reached for her. Her hand shook slightly, betraying the intensity of her suffering, yet there was a firmness there, a refusal to let go. "I didn't hide from you because I hated you," she whispered, voice raw, quivering with unshed tears. "I hid because I knew your enemies would kill anything connected to you. Everything. Everything I did to protect you, even if it meant keeping you out of my life." Adrian's chest tightened painfully. The weight of those words, the years of isolation and fear, slammed into him harder than any bullet ever could. 5 years of her being alone, haunted by him, haunted by threats he couldn't control. He had been absent when she needed him most. And now, standing there, hearing her confession, feeling the pulse of life and fear in her hand against his, he realized the magnitude of his failure. He swallowed hard, a lump rising in his throat, emotions he had long buried threatening to spill. Anger at himself, sorrow for the years lost, love that had never truly faded. It all collided in a tumultuous wave. He had controlled empires, bent men and nations to his will, yet here he was powerless, forced to confront the fragility of life and the consequences of his absence. Serena's breaths came shallow, rapid, each one a reminder of the life she carried, the child who was partly his and yet wholly vulnerable. Adrian's mind raced, replaying the last time he had seen her, the stolen glances, the whispers, the night of passion and terror that had left them both scarred. Every memory clawed at him, each one a mix of longing and regret. The thought of losing her now, of failing again, ignited a fire in him that rivaled any fury he had ever unleashed on his enemies. The monitors around the room beeped with sharp urgency, a staccato rhythm that mirrored the rapid pounding of his heart. The doctor's eyes met his, a silent plea for prompt action. Adrian nodded, his voice low but commanding. "Do it, but stay close. Don't take anything for granted." Serena's grip tightened on his hand, nails digging into his palm. He felt her tremble, the tiny shivers running through her body, and he knew the fear she carried was not just for herself. It was for the life inside her, a life that represented hope, love, and everything he had fought to protect, yet had almost lost. "Adrian," she whispered again, voice cracking. "I need you. Please, don't leave me." He pressed his thumb against hers, steadying her, grounding himself at the same time. "I'm here. I won't leave," he replied, though even he felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down. The words felt inadequate, fragile in the face of the storm raging around them. Yet they were all he had, and he clung to them as a lifeline. The medical team moved efficiently, preparing the emergency equipment, their actions precise yet urgent. Adrian hovered, eyes scanning, instincts alert. Every flicker of movement, every sound, every breath seemed magnified in the tense atmosphere of the room. The air was thick, almost suffocating, with the scent of antiseptic, sweat, and fear, mingling with the underlying electricity of anticipation and dread. Serena's eyes flickered to him repeatedly, seeking reassurance, seeking strength. She had endured so much in silence, so much solitude, and now, in this crucible of pain and life, she leaned on him as if all the years of absence had culminated in this single, desperate moment. Adrian realized the weight of responsibility he bore, not as a mafia boss, not as a man of power, but as someone who had the power to protect, to save, to love, to atone. He could feel the baby moving, small, weak yet persistent, a tiny pulse of life against the storm. His jaw clenched, and he gritted his teeth, willing himself to remain calm, to stay steady for both mother and child. The beeping of the monitors quickened, a sharp reminder that time was running out, that every second mattered, and that hesitation could cost them everything. Serena whispered again, softer this time, almost inaudible. "I never stopped. I never stopped caring, Adrian. Even when you weren't there, I never stopped hoping." Her tears ran freely now, trailing down her cheeks, but she didn't let go. She held his gaze, fierce and fragile all at once. Adrian's throat tightened. The past and present collided violently inside him, the regrets, the love, the fear, the urgency, all smashing together into a maelstrom that left him breathless. He realized that this moment, this room, this night, carried more weight than any battle, any negotiation, any empire he had ever commanded. The stakes were life itself. He leaned closer, his forehead nearly touching hers. "You don't have to carry this alone anymore. I'm here. I won't let anything happen to you or our child," he vowed, though his voice trembled despite his best effort to maintain control. The promise was absolute, forged in years of longing and regret, and underscored by the danger pressing in from every angle. The doctor's voice cut sharply through the tension. "We need to start now. Any delay could be catastrophic." Adrian nodded, releasing her hand just long enough for the medical team to begin, but he stayed at her side, his presence a shield, a constant anchor. Serena's breath hitched with every movement, every touch, every sound, and Adrian matched her rhythm, a silent reassurance in the storm. Outside the window, a storm raged quietly, rain lashing against the glass, a reflection of the chaos inside. Every flash of lightning illuminated the room in stark, unrelenting light, every clap of thunder shaking the walls and their fragile hearts alike. Adrian felt the intensity of the night pressing against him, as though fate itself were testing him, as though the universe had orchestrated this trial to see if he could rise above fear, above pain, above the ghosts of the past. The seconds stretched into minutes, each one a lifetime. Adrian's eyes never left Serena's face, studying every twitch, every tremor, every flicker of expression. He felt her pain as his own, her fear as his own, her strength intertwining with his resolve. He realized that nothing else had ever mattered more, Not power, not money, not revenge, not even survival. Only this. Only her. Only the life they had created together and the future they could still claim if he didn't falter. A sudden alarm on the monitors pierced the room, sharp and relentless. The baby's heartbeat wavered, then steadied, then faltered again. Serena gasped, and Adrian's stomach dropped. His hands clenched into fists, nails biting into his palms. This was no longer just about the past or regrets. It was about now, this second, this fragile intersection of life and death. The doctor called out instructions, precise and urgent, while Adrian leaned closer to Serena, whispering encouragement, murmuring promises he barely trusted himself to keep. Every word, every touch, every heartbeat felt magnified. The room was a pressure cooker of fear, hope, love, and desperation. Adrian knew, in that instant, that nothing he had ever done in his life had prepared him for this. Not the wars, not the assassins, not the betrayals. This was a different battlefield, one where the stakes were infinitely higher because the lives at risk were those he loved most, and the consequences were irrevocable. And in that crucible, standing over Serena as the medical team worked with unwavering precision, Adrian understood the depth of the bond he had ignored, the years lost to fear and circumstance, and the fire of a love that had never truly died. The night pressed on, unrelenting, the future uncertain, and the storm outside echoed the turmoil within. Every second was a test, every breath a challenge, every heartbeat a fragile thread connecting them to hope. The rhythmic beeping of the monitors seemed deafening now, each pulse a reminder of how fragile life could be. Adrian's eyes never left Serena's face, the lines of pain etched deep across her brow, the sweat glistening along her temples. Every breath she drew was shallow and measured, a battle in itself, and Adrian felt each one as if it were his own. Suddenly, a shadow flickered outside the window, a black shape moving swiftly against the storm-lashed glass. Adrian froze, instincts sharpening instantly. Something was wrong. The hairs on the back of his neck prickled, every sense screaming alarm. Serena's hand trembled in his, but her eyes widened as they followed his gaze. She could sense danger, even through the haze of pain and fear. "What is it?" she whispered, voice fragile but edged with worry. Adrian's jaw clenched. "We're not alone," he said, low, cold, controlled. He scanned the corridors outside the room, the empty halls, the flickering fluorescent lights casting long, distorted shadows. He'd seen enough betrayal, enough ambushes, enough enemies to know the signs. This was not coincidence. A black SUV had been tailing her for days, stalking her every movement, forcing her into hiding, and tonight, the threat had finally caught up. Adrian's mind raced, mapping out every possible scenario, every angle, every weakness. Rumors of a new faction, one intent on targeting his bloodline, had reached his ears weeks ago. He had dismissed them as whispers, nothing more than the chatter of rival gangs. But now the reality was undeniable. Fear had manifested into violence, and they were closing in. He squeezed Serena's hand, feeling her panic mingle with his own, though he refused to let it show. "You'll be safe," he promised, voice steady despite the storm of thoughts in his mind. She clung to him, eyes wide, breaths hitching. The terror in her gaze mirrored his own, but he could not falter. Not now. The silence shattered violently. Alarms blared, shrill and urgent, echoing down the sterile hospital corridors. Adrian's ears rang as masked men burst through the emergency doors, their movements precise and merciless. They were fast, trained, and armed, a wave of calculated violence. Nurses screamed, patients bolted in panic, and the sterile air of the hospital erupted into chaos. Adrian's heart pounded, not with fear, but with focus. Serena gasped, clutching his arm, eyes wide with horror. "Adrian, don't let them take our child," she pleaded, voice breaking, tears streaming down her pale cheeks. Her grip tightened, a lifeline in the maelstrom of panic. Adrian's mind moved faster than his heart could beat. There were too many variables, too much uncertainty, and yet instincts honed over decades surged forward. Every lesson learned in the underworld, every ambush survived, every war fought. None of it had prepared him for this singular mission. He shifted, muscles coiled, ready to react. His empire had trained him for wars, for bloodshed, for domination, but nothing could have readied him for protecting a life he had never expected to exist, a child that carried pieces of both him and Serena. The room became a battlefield. Hospital equipment clattered to the floor as masked intruders advanced, shoving aside anyone in their path. Adrian pivoted, blocking the first man with his shoulder, sending the attacker crashing into a metal cart. Monitors beeped wildly, alarms screeched, and the acrid smell of fear and blood filled the room. Serena screamed, her voice raw, echoing off the walls. Adrian gritted his teeth, lunging forward to shield her, moving with the precision of a man who had survived countless battles. Each masked man was another problem to solve, another threat to neutralize before they could reach the fragile life cradled in her womb. He grabbed one attacker, twisting him to the ground with calculated force, but more surged forward. His movements were brutal, precise, controlled, efficiency born from necessity. The hospital corridor was chaos incarnate. Doors slammed, patients cried, and the sterile white walls became a canvas for panic. Adrian's eyes darted, tracking every figure, calculating trajectories, predicting every strike. He knew this was not random. The attackers were professionals, their motives deliberate, their training evident. This was a coordinated strike, meant to destabilize, to intimidate, to seize what they believed they had the right to claim. Serena's cries were piercing, a mixture of pain and fear, and each one drove him harder. "Adrian, protect him. Protect him," she begged, voice raw, fragmented by contractions and terror. He tightened his jaw, muscles coiling, and whispered fiercely, I swear I won't let them take him, not while I breathe." The first masked man lunged with a blade, and Adrian intercepted with a snap of his wrist, disarming him in a move that was both violent and fluid. Another swung a metal rod, and Adrian dodged, countering with a kick that sent the man sprawling. The sound of impact, the shouts of fear, the relentless alarms, all formed a cacophony that heightened his senses, made him hyper-aware of every detail. He could see the reflections in the polished floors, the shadows flickering across the walls, the terrified eyes of nurses and patients alike. One attacker tried to grab Serena, and Adrian lunged, catching the man's arm mid-grab, twisting, disarming, throwing him to the side. His focus was absolute, laser-sharp. Every movement was calculated yet instinctive, a dance of life and death that left no margin for error. Serena trembled violently, but her grip on his arm never loosened. She was terrified, yes, but there was trust in her eyes, trust in his presence, even amid the chaos. A fire alarm blared suddenly, sprinklers flooding the room with sheets of water. The masked men slipped, staggered, but pressed on, relentless. Adrian adapted instantly, recalculating every angle, adjusting his defense. He grabbed Serena, pulling her behind an overturned medical cart, shielding her from the immediate threat. Water splashed across the floor, making every step precarious, every movement a gamble. The baby inside Serena kicked, weakly, a reminder of the stakes, of the fragile life depending entirely on his strength and decisions. Adrian's eyes narrowed, heart hammering. "Stay with me," he growled, more to himself than to her. "We're not done yet." The attackers regrouped, advancing with renewed determination. Adrian counted, 3 on the left, 2 on the right, 1 directly ahead, and moved with surgical precision. Each strike was decisive, each motion deliberate. A sharp kick to the knee, a twist of an arm, a shove into a wall. The hospital that had once been a sanctuary now resembled a war zone. Serena moaned, contractions gripping her, sweat dripping down her temples. Adrian glanced at her, eyes filled with a mix of fury, fear, and desperate love. The attackers were professionals, trained killers, but he had something they didn't, stakes that went beyond money, beyond power, beyond life itself. This was personal. This was blood. This was legacy. A shadow moved behind him. Adrian pivoted sharply, striking down the man before he could reach Serena. Another swung a crowbar and Adrian ducked, rolling to the side, grabbing the nearest object, a heavy IV stand, and swung it with controlled force. The man collapsed, groaning. Chaos raged, alarms shrieked, water sprayed from the sprinklers in sheets, and the hospital floor became a battlefield of panic, desperation, and fury. Serena whimpered, voice cracking. "Adrian, hurry, please, hurry." Her words were a dagger through his resolve, pushing him to move faster, strike harder, protect stronger. He could feel the baby's heartbeat, weak yet insistent, a fragile drum calling for survival. He would not fail them, not now, not ever. Every second was a gamble, every movement a decision between life and death. Adrian's mind cataloged every escape route, every potential weapon, every flaw in the attacker's formation. He was in complete control of the chaos, yet powerless against the sheer uncertainty of the situation. The masked men pressed, relentless, but he met them with a fury born of love and desperation. One attacker tried to flank from the side. Adrian spun, catching the man with a brutal precision strike, sending him sprawling. Another lunged with a knife. Adrian caught the blade, twisted the attacker's wrist, and slammed him to the ground. The room was a blur of movement, noise, fear, and fury. He barely had time to breathe. Serena's grip on him tightened again, a silent plea, a fragile thread anchoring him to the purpose beyond the violence. "We can't let them take him," she gasped. "He's ours. He's ours, Adrian, please." Her voice pierced through the chaos, a mixture of terror and hope, and Adrian's heart clenched. Every instinct, every ounce of strength, every lesson from a lifetime of bloodshed focused on that single truth. Nothing would touch them if he could stop it. The monitors continued their frantic beeping, the alarms shrieked, the water splashed, the attackers lunged, and Adrian stood as an immovable force, a shield, a storm unto himself. Every blow he struck was for Serena, every move he made was for the child, and every heartbeat was a declaration. No one would take them tonight. 4. The shrill alarms continued to echo down the hospital corridors, a relentless cacophony that clashed with the sound of Adrian's controlled breaths. He pressed his back against the wall for a moment, scanning the chaotic scene, analyzing every shadow, every movement, every possible threat. Serena's hand remained clutched in his, her skin damp with sweat, trembling but still seeking the anchor of his presence. Every instinct in Adrian screamed danger, yet his mind remained razor-sharp, processing variables faster than most men could comprehend. He edged along the corridor, dragging her behind him as they moved toward the hospital's private wing, a secured area designed for emergencies but never tested under the conditions they faced tonight. Each step was deliberate, calculated, every motion purposeful. Adrian's eyes caught the glint of steel in the masked intruder's hands, the flash of movement in the periphery, the subtle shift of shadows. He anticipated their attacks before they even launched, his senses trained on survival, protection, and precision. The first corridor revealed its first assailant, stepping out from behind a corner with a calculated swing of a knife. Adrian intercepted with brutal efficiency, catching the man's wrist mid-strike, twisting and sending him crashing into the wall. A symbol on the man's wrist caught his eye, a small crimson circle. His stomach dropped. The red circle, a syndicate notorious for claiming heirs of powerful families to manipulate bloodlines and wield leverage over empires. They were not here to kill. They were here to take, to claim, to control what was theirs by twisted law and lethal intent. Adrian's jaw tightened. This was not random violence. This was personal. This was strategic. And they had chosen the most precious target imaginable, his bloodline, his child. Fury surged through him, cold and methodical, merging with the instinctive precision he had honed over years in the underworld. His strikes were efficient, calculated, devastating. Each move neutralized a threat, yet the path forward remained uncertain. He pushed Serena gently behind an overturned medical cart, shielding her from the immediate danger. Her breaths came shallow, rapid, each contraction reminding him of the stakes, the fragility of life, the urgency of every second. Adrian scanned the hall again, counting attackers, calculating angles, predicting every possible assault. The red circle was methodical, professional, trained, every move designed to overwhelm and exploit hesitation. But Adrian had no hesitation. As he dispatched another masked man with a precise, forceful strike, he noticed the blood glinting on the floor, the smeared footprints, the equipment scattered in the chaos. The hospital, a place meant for healing and life, had transformed into a war zone. The stark white walls were splattered with fear, sweat, and streaks of red. The alarms blared relentlessly, interspersed with the shrieks of terrified nurses and the muffled cries of patients fleeing the area. Adrian's mind remained focused. Each strike, each block, each maneuver was executed with deadly precision. He moved Serena toward the inner sanctum of the wing, the part designed to be most secure, most shielded from intrusion. The intruders pressed on, relentless, but Adrian anticipated their every move. A man lunged from behind a pillar with a crowbar. Adrian sidestepped, pivoted, and delivered a crushing blow to the attacker's knee, sending him sprawling. Another came at him with a knife. Adrian caught it mid-swing, twisting the man's wrist and slamming him to the ground. Finally, they reached the secure wing. Adrian barricaded the door behind them, pulling a small firearm from his coat with cold, steady hands. He scanned the room, noting every window, every potential entrance, every corner where danger could hide. The red circle was cunning. They would not relent. He adjusted his stance, body coiled like a predator, senses primed for the next wave. But amid the fury, the chaos, and the adrenaline, Adrian's heart lurched. A sharp, panicked voice called out from behind him, the doctor's voice cracking with fear and urgency. "Mr. Voss!" "Serena!" "Her blood pressure is plummeting. The baby's heartbeat is dropping. We need immediate intervention." Adrian's stomach twisted. He turned to her, gripping her hand tightly, feeling the small, fragile pulse against his own. He whispered fiercely, every word a desperate promise, every syllable a lifeline. "Stay with me. Focus on me. I won't let anything happen to you. Not now. Not ever." Serena's eyes fluttered open, fogged with pain but locking onto his, drawing strength from his presence. The monitors beeped frantically, alarms screaming. Adrian could feel the tension in the room escalate, a living, breathing thing that pressed down on him from all sides. He could see the fear etched into the doctor's face, the frantic movements of the medical team, the helplessness of the nurses. And beneath it all, the red circle's threat loomed, the unrelenting shadow of the syndicate that sought to claim his child for their twisted power games. Adrian's mind raced through every possible contingency. He adjusted his hold on Serena's hand, brushing damp hair from her forehead, whispering assurances he barely felt capable of believing himself. His empire, his power, his entire life had taught him to control, to dominate, to survive. But none of it had prepared him for the terror of possibly losing the woman he loved and the child they had created together. Every second stretched unbearably long. He could hear the faint echo of footsteps outside the secured wing, the subtle movement of shadows that indicated the red circle was not finished, that this was a test of endurance, will, and strategy. Adrian's gaze hardened. jaw tight, resolve absolute. They wanted leverage. He would give them nothing. The doctor shouted instructions, prepping emergency interventions, while Adrian remained a constant presence at Serena's side, whispering encouragement, murmuring promises, and grounding her in the storm. Sweat ran down his temple, mixing with blood from minor scrapes, his body a vessel of focus and fury. Serena gasped, a shuddering sound that echoed the fragility of life inside her. He could feel every kick, every flutter, every sign of the child within, a pulse of hope amidst the chaos. Time became a blur, each second a razor's edge between hope and disaster. Adrian monitored every monitor, every reading, every subtle change in Serena's condition. He adjusted her position gently, applied pressure where needed, his movements precise, fluid, deliberate. Each gesture carried weight beyond calculation, for failure here meant death, heartbreak, and irreversible loss. The alarms outside grew louder as distant sirens joined the fray, a reminder that the world beyond these walls was unaware of the war happening within. Adrian's senses sharpened further, filtering every sound, every flash of movement, every potential threat. The red circle would attempt to breach this sanctuary, but he would meet them at every turn. Serena's breaths grew ragged, and Adrian whispered her name, calling forth every fragment of hope he could summon, weaving reassurance and love into words that trembled, yet carried iron resolve. The baby's heartbeat faltered briefly, then steadied, a fragile rhythm that mirrored the tenuous control he held over the chaos. The red circle's methods were clear. They sought leverage, control, intimidation. But Adrian had adapted, evolved, and now his focus had crystallized into one absolute truth. No one would touch them, not the intruders, not fate, not the ghosts of the past. The war, once abstract and distant, had become intimate, immediate, personal. The battle was no longer about empires or power. It was about blood, family, and survival. He could feel Serena's panic mingling with his own, yet her strength inspired him. She trusted him, and that trust became the tether anchoring him to clarity amidst chaos. Every breath, every heartbeat, every flicker of monitors, every sound of alarms sharpened his resolve. He would not fail. He could not fail. And then, in the midst of the storm, a shadow crossed the secure window, a subtle movement, a reminder that the danger was not over. Adrian's head snapped up, eyes narrowing, muscles coiled like springs. The red circle had not yet revealed all their intentions. The threat remained, constant, looming, and he understood with absolute clarity. This was only the beginning. He drew in a controlled breath, squeezing Serena's hand, whispering again with fervent intensity, "I'm here. I won't let go. Not now. Not ever." Her eyes locked with his, fragile but fierce, and for a moment the room seemed to still, the chaos momentarily suspended by the unspoken bond and the relentless determination burning in Adrian's gaze. The baby kicked again, stronger this time, a spark of life that surged hope into Adrian's veins. He braced himself, ready for the next wave, the next attack, the next impossible challenge. The hospital had become a battlefield, and he was the storm within it, relentless, unyielding, and absolutely determined to protect what was his, what was theirs, at any cost. The monitors screamed in rapid, urgent beeps, a chaotic symphony of life and fragility. Adrian's hands were firm on Serena's wrist, his fingers clutching hers as if sheer force could anchor both of them against the storm raging in the hospital around them. Her eyes, wide and glazed with pain, searched his face as the contractions hit with relentless fury, each one a hammer pounding against the fragile walls of endurance. Sweat slicked his palms, dripped down his temple, yet he did not release her, did not avert his gaze, did not allow even a second of hesitation. Breathe, in, out. Focus, he murmured, voice low, a mantra repeated over and over, a tether between him and her, between him and the life growing inside her. Serena gasped, shivering violently, teeth clenched, tears streaking her cheeks, but she obeyed, letting his presence guide her through the storm. The room smelled of antiseptic, sweat, fear, and something more primal. Life on the edge of death, a tension so thick it pressed against Adrian's chest. Each push brought another scream, raw, shattering, echoing through the sterile room. Adrian's pulse raced, but he remained a pillar of resolve, unyielding, every fiber of his being dedicated to ensuring Serena and the child survived. He leaned closer, whispering her name like a prayer, repeating it as though speaking it aloud could alter fate. "Serena, you're doing this. You're strong. Hold on." His words were a lifeline. The baby's heartbeat fluctuated on the monitor, a fragile signal against the chaos surrounding them. Adrian's eyes darted between the screen and Serena, calculating every second, measuring every breath. The red circle's threat was still outside, a ghost hovering over their victory, waiting to pounce at the precise moment they were weakest. The tension made the air itself feel heavy, suffocating, yet he could not afford to falter. Serena screamed again, body trembling violently as another contraction racked her. Adrian tightened his grip, leaning closer, speaking in urgent whispers, encouraging her to push, to fight, to survive. Every scream from her lips cut him to the core, igniting a fierce, protective instinct, a determination beyond calculation, beyond logic. The baby's life depended on this moment, and Adrian would allow nothing to disrupt it. Then, a small, sharp cry split the cacophony. The sound was fragile, yet fierce, a tiny declaration of existence that pierced Adrian's heart like a blade. Their child had entered the world. Relief surged, but it was fleeting, a fragile flicker in a room still steeped in danger and chaos. Serena collapsed, exhausted, her skin pale, lips tinged blue, eyes glazed with pain and the effort of survival. Adrian's chest tightened as he supported her, whispering frantic reassurances, feeling the life within her settle, fragile but present. The doctors rushed in, assessing both mother and child with rapid efficiency, voices overlapping in urgent commands. Adrian remained at her, side, guiding her, steadying her, refusing to leave her grasp even as medical hands intervened. His mind, however, could not rest. Every noise outside the secure wing, every echo of footsteps, every flicker of shadow reminded him the red circle had not finished. Their intent was not violence for its own sake. It was leverage, domination, and theft of what was most precious to him. Before he could fully exhale, a sound cut through the organized chaos. A door slammed open, metallic and harsh. Smoke grenades ignited in the hallway outside, acrid tendrils curling into the room, reducing visibility, creating panic. Adrian's eyes narrowed, muscles coiling instinctively. He could smell the chemical sting in the air, taste it at the back of his throat, yet his focus remained absolute, trained, unyielding. A figure emerged through the haze, eyes cold, a gun gripped tightly in one hand. The man was confident, poised, exuding lethal calm, the lieutenant of the Red Circle. Adrian's blood ran cold, not from fear, but from the stark clarity of the threat. He was no longer defending territory, no longer enforcing power. This fight was primal, personal, and absolute. "You're a father now," the lieutenant sneered, voice devoid of warmth, dripping with menace. Each word reverberated through the room, punctuated by the alarms, the cries, and the smoke curling through the air. Adrian's fingers tightened around Serena's wrist instinctively, the tiny life she carried burning in his chest like a furnace. He could feel the adrenaline coursing through him, sharpening senses, enhancing every movement, every calculation, every instinct. The lieutenant advanced slowly, deliberately, weapon raised. Adrian positioned himself between him and Serena, the baby's presence, the fragile life that represented both love and legacy, anchoring him. "You won't touch them," Adrian said, voice low, dangerous, every syllable a promise, a threat, a warning. His heart pounded, but his mind was ice, precise, unyielding, ready for the inevitable confrontation. Smoke swirled around the room, obscuring vision, amplifying tension. Nurses and doctors shouted, gesturing, moving equipment, trying to maintain order. But Adrian's focus was singular. Every step the lieutenant took, every twitch of his hand, every flick of the gun was analyzed, anticipated, and countered in his mind. The Red Circle believed they could intimidate him, claim what was his, but they had underestimated the depth of his resolve. Serena whimpered, weak and trembling, but her eyes found his. A connection, wordless and fierce, passed between them. Adrian's gaze locked with hers, conveying every ounce of promise, every shred of determination, every willingness to risk everything. He would not allow them to steal this moment, this life, this family. The lieutenant's smirk faltered as Adrian shifted, body coiled, ready to strike. Every instinct honed over years of power and blood transformed into a singular focus: protect, survive, dominate the threat. The world outside, the empire, the gang war, the deals, all of it vanished. Only this room existed, only this life mattered, only the fragile cry of the newborn, mingling with the trembling breaths of Serena, commanded his attention. Smoke burned his eyes, stinging and relentless, yet he remained unwavering. His movements were precise, measured but fast, blocking the lieutenant's advance, keeping him at bay, assessing every angle for potential attack. The gun in the lieutenant's hand glinted in the flickering light, a constant reminder that one wrong move, one hesitation, could undo everything. Serena's breaths were shallow, ragged, yet she clung to him, trembling but present, trusting him implicitly. Adrian whispered her name, again and again, a tether, a lifeline, a rhythm that synchronized with every beat of his own heart. The monitors beeped erratically, baby's heartbeat fragile but present, and the room seemed to shrink, every threat magnified, every second stretching into eternity. The lieutenant advanced, slow and deliberate, testing, probing. Adrian matched him step for step, muscle memory and instinct guiding every motion, every feint, every subtle maneuver. His mind ran calculations in milliseconds, angles, potential strikes, exits, contingencies. Every variable mattered, every second was critical, every heartbeat could decide life or death. A gunshot rang out from the hallway, ricocheting off walls, sending sparks of metal into the air. Adrian instinctively ducked, rolling into a position that shielded both Serena and the newborn. Smoke swirled thicker now, alarms screamed louder, and the lieutenant paused, calculating, frustrated by Adrian's unyielding stance. The baby kicked, a fragile flutter of life that ignited Adrian's resolve further. "You won't have him," he growled, voice low and dangerous, every word a promise and a threat. Serena clutched him, weak but determined, and in that shared gaze, a silent bond formed. Survival, protection, and the beginning of a life they would defend at all costs. The lieutenant smirked, but there was tension now, a subtle crack in his confidence. Adrian's presence was overwhelming, unwavering, unrelenting. Every muscle in his body was coiled, every sense primed, every heartbeat synced to the fragility and fury of the moment. He was not just a man, not just a mob boss. He was a protector, a father, a storm incarnate. The smoke swirled, alarms blared, monitors screamed, and the battlefield of the hospital narrowed to a single point: Adrian, Serena, the newborn, and the man who dared to claim what was theirs. The room seemed to pulse with tension, every second stretching, every breath suspended, every motion weighted with possibility and danger. And in that suspended moment, as the lieutenant raised his weapon again, the tiniest, most defiant sound cut through the chaos. The newborn cried once more, fierce and insistent, a declaration of existence that challenged the darkness itself. Adrian's gaze sharpened, jaw tightening, muscles coiling, and he whispered again, a mantra of resolve, love, and fury, "No one will touch you." The smoke still lingered in the hospital wing, curling in pale tendrils like ghosts of the chaos that had just erupted. Adrian's eyes burned through it, scanning every shadow, every movement, every potential threat. The lieutenant had the baby, cradled like a twisted trophy, his expression a mixture of arrogance and malice. Each step he took toward the exit was calculated, deliberate, a display of confidence that spoke of training, precision, and merciless intent. Adrian's body tensed, muscles coiled like steel cables. He was no longer just a mob boss operating in a world of power and influence. He was a father, a protector, a man whose entire being focused on one impossible objective: retrieving his child, alive, unharmed, from the hands of men who would use him as leverage. Every instinct, every reflex honed over years of crime and combat was now sharpened by an almost primal love. He moved silently at first, shadowing the lieutenant's steps, calculating distances, angles, and potential escape routes. Each corridor they passed was a gauntlet of peril. Nurses, doctors, and patients had fled, leaving echoes of chaos that reverberated off sterile walls. Adrian's breath was controlled, measured, even as adrenaline surged through him, heightening every sense, making him acutely aware of the tiniest movements, the faintest noises. The lieutenant paused at the end of the hall, glancing over his shoulder with a smirk that ignited fury in Adrian's chest. "You think you can stop me?" he sneered, holding the baby at arm's length, a weapon and a bargaining chip in a single, horrifying gesture. His confidence was palpable, but Adrian did not flinch. He analyzed, calculated, waited for the exact moment to strike. Adrian's thoughts raced. Every second mattered. One misstep, one hesitation, and the child's life, his son's life, would be lost. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him, heavier than any empire, any gun, any contract he had ever signed. His mind was a razor, cutting through fear, doubt, and emotion, focusing solely on the singular goal: retrieve the baby. The lieutenant moved again, stepping toward the elevator, a direct path to freedom. Adrian mirrored him silently, shadowing each move, anticipating the angle of his next step. The child's cries, soft yet insistent, echoed through the corridor, each one spurring Adrian into sharper focus. He whispered to himself, a mantra to steady his mind, one step at a time: protect, survive, reclaim. Suddenly the lieutenant paused, sensing the shadow behind him. His head turned sharply, eyes narrowing, scanning the corridor. Adrian remained perfectly still, every muscle coiled, ready to explode into action at the slightest provocation. The tension between predator and prey crackled through the air, invisible yet suffocating. The baby stirred, tiny fingers curling around the lieutenant's grip. Adrian felt a surge of anger and fear collide. He could not allow these men to manipulate, to threaten, to coerce him through the life of his child. His mind raced through options: negotiation, distraction, force. But time was fleeting, and hesitation would be lethal. A sudden noise, a falling tray from a nearby room, made the lieutenant flinch. Adrian seized the instant. With a fluid motion, he lunged, closing the distance between them in a heartbeat. The world seemed to narrow, sounds muffled except for the rapid drum of his heartbeat. Adrian's hand shot forward, gripping the lieutenant's wrist, twisting sharply. The gun rattled in the intruder's grip, forcing him to stumble back. The baby cried, startled, and Adrian's chest tightened at the sound, sharpening his resolve. This was no longer a fight for territory or power. This was a fight for blood, for family, for the very essence of his life beyond the Empire. The lieutenant snarled, attempting to twist free, but Adrian's hold was unyielding. Every movement was precise, methodical, designed to disarm without harm to the fragile life he carried. Sweat ran down Adrian's brow, muscles burned, yet focus never wavered. One miscalculation could undo everything. The corridor stretched endlessly, echoing with distant alarms and sirens, a surreal backdrop to a battle that had transformed into a high-stakes test of skill, patience, and endurance. Adrian pivoted, using the momentum to slam the lieutenant against the wall, the impact reverberating through their bodies. The gun clattered to the floor, sliding along the tiles, out of immediate reach. Adrian's eyes locked on the lieutenant, calculating, precise, merciless. He drew his own weapon in a swift, fluid motion, aiming not to kill but to incapacitate. A single controlled shot rang out, and the lieutenant crumpled, a sharp cry of pain escaping as the bullet struck his knee. The baby squirmed, startled but unharmed, and Adrian's chest rose and fell with relief tempered by vigilance. He moved quickly, cradling his son against his chest, every motion protective, instinctive. The tiny body pressed against him, fragile yet real, a heartbeat synchronizing with his own, a living tether to a future he would fight to defend. Adrian's eyes scanned the corridor for remaining threats, every sense heightened, every muscle coiled for immediate action. The lieutenant writhed in pain, cursing, but Adrian's attention remained unwavering. "No one touches him," he growled, voice low, dangerous, iron-edged. Every word was a promise and a warning, carrying the weight of a man who had faced countless enemies, yet had never felt stakes this high. Adrenaline coursed through him as he navigated the remaining obstacles, shadows of fleeing intruders, debris from the chaos, the lingering smoke and haze. Each step was calculated to protect his child, to neutralize danger, to ensure survival. He could feel the fragile warmth of his son against his chest, a reminder that dominance, fear, and power were irrelevant compared to this one life. The hospital wing, still scarred by battle, seemed to shrink around him, every echo magnified, every movement exaggerated. Adrian's mind ran at lightning speed, anticipating pursuit, escape routes, and potential traps. Every instinct from years of violence fused with newfound paternal ferocity, creating a force that was unstoppable, unrelenting. As he moved toward the exit, the baby's cries punctuated the air, small yet insistent, fragile yet defiant. Adrian whispered soothing words, murmuring promises, his voice a steady anchor in a sea of chaos. The child's presence reinforced his focus, igniting a resolve beyond calculation. He would protect, he would survive, he would reclaim what was his. Finally, the corridor cleared, the immediate threat neutralized, but the tension still palpable. Adrian adjusted his hold on his son, checking for any sign of injury, his eyes flicking to every shadow, every angle, every potential ambush. The lieutenant groaned behind him, immobilized but alive, a stark reminder that their war had escalated into something far more personal. Adrian exhaled sharply, but only briefly. The weight of responsibility, of survival, of the fragile life in his arms pressed him forward. Each step carried the gravity of fatherhood, the reckoning of his past, the promise of the future. He was no longer merely a mob boss navigating empires. He was a protector, a guardian, a man whose focus had shifted from power to the bloodline that now defined his existence. The hospital's exit loomed ahead, flickering lights casting harsh shadows. Adrian moved deliberately, eyes scanning, senses heightened. The red circle was cunning, relentless, yet he had adapted, evolved, and now his every motion was infused with one unyielding purpose: the survival of his son, the preservation of family, and the reclamation of life from the grasp of those who sought to manipulate and destroy it. Cradling his child, Adrian felt a profound shift. Dominance and fear were meaningless. All that mattered was life, love, and the fragile warmth of family. The future depended on him, and he would face every threat, endure every trial, and conquer every danger to protect what was his. This battle had tested everything, pushed him to every limit, and forced him to redefine his priorities. For the first time, Adrian understood fully that crime, power, and empire paled in comparison to the life of the child he now held, the woman he loved beside him, and the family he was determined to protect at all costs. The test of everything had been endured, but the war was far from over. Yet in this moment, as he held his son tightly, he knew one truth above all: nothing, no threat, no empire, no force in the world could undo this bond, this life, this unwavering commitment. The villa was silent, the kind of silence that carries both relief and exhaustion, punctuated only by the faint hum of the heating system and the occasional creak of settling wood. Dawn filtered through the tall windows, pale light spilling across the polished floors and casting long, soft shadows that seemed almost protective. Adrian had chosen this place carefully, a remote sanctuary far from prying eyes, from the chaos of the city, from the threats that had stalked them for weeks. Every detail mattered. The locks, the perimeter, the security measures, but none of it mattered more than the fragile life cradled in his arms and the woman whose survival had been uncertain mere hours ago. He moved quietly through the villa, every footstep measured, alert despite the weariness that clung to his muscles. The baby's soft whimpers were barely audible beneath the weight of the night's terror, yet each sound drove Adrian forward with renewed determination. He had never experienced a fear quite like this, a fear not for power, not for territory, but for the life of something small, precious, and utterly dependent on him. The doctor emerged from the dim corridor, face etched with exhaustion but bearing the words Adrian had been praying for. "She made it," the doctor said, voice steady but laced with relief. The words struck Adrian like a release of tension he hadn't realized had built within him. His shoulders eased slightly, though every nerve in his body remained alert, protective, vigilant. Adrian stepped into the room where Serena lay, wrapped in blankets, her hair damp and matted, her face pale but alive. The first sight of her took his breath away. Her eyes met his, wide, glistening with tears that had refused to fall until this moment. The baby slept lightly in her arms, swaddled in soft fabric, tiny fists curled around the blanket, chest rising and falling with delicate, perfect rhythm. Adrian's heart constricted and expanded simultaneously, a storm of relief, awe, and love crashing through him. He knelt beside her, placing a hand gently on the blanket, careful not to disturb the fragile bundle. The weight of the moment pressed down on him, the realization that after years of running, of hiding, of living in fear and power, this, the life he held in his hands, was the reason every fight, every choice, every sacrifice had mattered. His voice was low, raw, unguarded as he spoke, words heavy with years of regret and unspoken promises. "I failed you once. I won't fail you again. Let's raise him somewhere no one knows our names." Serena's hand reached up, trembling slightly, brushing against his cheek. Her touch carried the weight of forgiveness, relief, love, and exhaustion all at once. Adrian closed his eyes for a brief moment, savoring the connection, feeling the heat of her hand against his skin, and letting himself exist fully in the relief that they were alive, together, finally safe, at least for now. Callan, their son, stirred slightly, eyes fluttering open, delicate and bright. Adrian leaned closer, voice soft and reverent. "This is your home now, little one. You are ours, and we will protect you with everything we are." The baby's tiny fingers curled instinctively around Adrian's hand, a simple act that anchored him in the reality of what mattered. Every empire, every deal, every enemy faded into irrelevance compared to this fragile, perfect life. Serena smiled weakly, a mixture of fatigue and profound emotion, and whispered, "He's perfect, just like you feared, but better." Adrian's chest tightened at her words, understanding immediately the depth of what she meant. The terror, the danger, the chaos. They had survived it all, and now, in this quiet dawn, the possibility of peace, of a future, felt real for the first time in years. They settled together, Adrian kneeling beside the bed, Serena cradling Cullen. The light of morning washed over them, illuminating the contours of their faces, the tender expressions that had been absent for so long. The room felt sacred, a sanctuary carved from chaos, fear, and blood, now transformed into a space of life, warmth, and fragile hope. Adrian watched the baby closely, noting every tiny detail, the curl of hair, the shape of his tiny hands, the soft rise and fall of his chest. Each breath reminded him that they had survived, that the blood spilled, the battles fought, and the nights of endless vigilance had led to this singular, precious outcome. His gaze shifted to Serena, tracing the curve of her face, the slight tremor of exhaustion, and he understood fully the magnitude of what they had endured. Time seemed to stretch, every moment infused with the intensity of survival and the promise of beginnings. Adrian's hand moved to cover Serena's, a gesture of reassurance, connection, and silent acknowledgement that the horrors of the past no longer dictated their future. The villa outside remained quiet, a fortress against a world that had tried to destroy them, a symbol of their triumph and the fragility of life they now held dear. As morning light poured in, Adrian allowed himself to breathe fully, feeling the warmth of his son against his chest, the soft strength of Serena's hand on his cheek, and the profound, almost unreal sense that the storm had passed. For the first time in years, he felt untethered from the endless cycle of violence, betrayal, and power, connected instead to something enduring, tangible, and deeply human. He whispered promises again, not just of protection, but of life, love, and a future they would create together. "We will survive," he said softly, almost reverently. "We will live, and we will be free. No one will take this from us." Serena's eyes glistened with tears that finally fell, the first of many moments of release, trust, and shared strength. The villa, the dawn, the fragile peace. They were symbols, yes, but also reality. Adrian understood that the world outside remained dangerous, that enemies would always lurk in shadows, yet inside this space, inside this bond, they were unbreakable. Every moment of fear, every night of uncertainty, every confrontation had led to this fragile, perfect dawn. He studied Serena's face, memorizing the lines, the exhaustion, the beauty that had never dimmed, and for the first time, he allowed himself to imagine a life beyond fear. Callan's eyes fluttered again, tiny and perfect, and Adrian leaned in, pressing a gentle kiss to his son's forehead, a pledge of protection that transcended words. Serena shifted slightly, wrapping an arm around Adrian's shoulders, and they sat together, 3 lives intertwined in a moment suspended between past horrors and the potential of a new beginning. The world outside could rage, could threaten, could attempt to intrude, but inside, they were fortified by love, blood, and the unyielding determination to survive together. Hours passed as the sun climbed, spilling warmth and clarity across the villa. Adrian finally allowed himself to sit back, relaxed yet vigilant, eyes never leaving his son, mind cataloging contingencies, defenses, and safety measures. He knew the world would test them, that power and threats could never fully be escaped, but they had survived the worst, and this survival had redefined him, their family, and their future. In that quiet, sacred dawn, Adrian and Serena held their son, whispered promises into the warmth of the morning, and allowed themselves a fleeting but profound peace. For the first time in years, they were not running. They were not fighting. They were living. And as the light of day filled the room, Adrian understood fully that no enemy, no syndicate, no shadow of the past could undo what they had survived, what they had created, and the life they would protect with every fiber of their being. Callan stirred again, and Adrian smiled, whispering his name softly, a vow etched in silence. This is your world now, and we will guard it, together, always. Serena touched his cheek once more, and they shared a look of understanding, gratitude, and hope that transcended everything else. The past had ended. The future awaited, fragile yet bright, and they would face it not as fugitives, but as a family, united, unbroken, and unafraid. Dawn continued to light the villa, bathing the room in a golden glow that seemed almost miraculous, and Adrian allowed himself to feel, fully, unguarded, unshaken. The battles had tested him, life had challenged him, and love had redeemed him. They were alive, together, and finally free to build the life they had always dreamed of, a life no threat, no fear, and no shadow could ever destroy. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this story. If you felt the emotions, the suspense, or the drama, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Heartwoven Tales for more stories that touch the heart and thrill the soul. Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to know how this story made you feel. Until next time, keep your hearts open and your imagination alive.